Hello, hello, hello.
Hey, how you doing? Hey, it's another episode of X2Z. And that's because we have a lot of fun here and we have good conversations and we talk about what Gen X wants Gen Z to know. I am fortunate today to have with me Hannah, who you all know, and Anna. Don't get those two mixed up. It's hard sometimes. Um, Anna is one of our staff, and she's been a recruiter with us for just over a year.
Yeah.
And she's a great part of our team, and we're highlighting today just how not everyone in Gen Z sucks. I think that's kind of a summary statement.
It's a fair way to start the episode off. Not all Gen Zs suck.
Yes, actually, did you know this? There are some people in Gen X that suck.
Hmm.
We're not all overcomers, and I would say I'm probably an overcomer. I've been down and out and back again, and lots of my friends have, and lots of we were the lock key generation, and so we did take it in the head a little bit more than maybe your generation has. I think there's been some care and concern over the Gen Z population that is too much, and an overreaction to what Gen X parents did to Gen X. And that's the way all parenting goes, let's be honest. Hannah is going to parent her kids very differently the way that we parented her. And that's not bad. It's just reactionary. Most of us are reactionary in the way we have those relationships. But this episode really comes off a reaction to the great counselor, Dr. Phil. And he did an episode where he was crapping on Gen Z. And I've seen a bunch of this in my Insta Reels and YouTube Shorts and wherever I'm watching, trying to kill time. And it just bugs me.
Well, this might shock you, but I definitely don't agree with everything that you just said. But before we get back to that,
good.
We should talk about why Anna is here today, why she specifically is joining us as she's the second member from our team. We brought Stano on as he came on board as an announcement. And then we were like, hey, that was so great. We need to do more of that. And so we went through a great series. We've had some trucking episodes which have been phenomenal. But in the midst of that, we gave out an award this week. And Miss Anna over here took it home. Or it actually just got sent to her in the mail because she's a work from home employee. But
she was here this week. We mailed it to her there when she was in town. That drives me nuts.
Okay. Yeah. I don't think we had quite put all of those pieces together. So lucky for you guys to be together today. I'm a little jealous. You're gonna go out for lunch after this before the long weekend. Like that's so upsetting to miss out on. But work from home life.
It's pretty hard to have those privileges when you work from home.
That's fair.
So
except Anna's now getting the best of both worlds because she just came
double
in for
dipper.
It.
She's double dipping. She gets the benefits of both.
100%.
But Anna, do you want to talk a little bit about the story of what happened and why you got the award, or do you want us to spread the love on it? Do you want to tell the story? Or do you want us to?
Sure. Well, so from what I understand, I got the award for intensity.
Yes.
And what I have been doing is that I make sure that I'm available. That's something that you've always preached about in the staffing world. You really have to have flexible hours because you have employees going into work at different times. And one of the most important things is that people feel, that someone's there looking out for them, especially when they're going into work for the first shift. So I had somebody going into work at 12 and then they were late. And then I was giving updates to the client that they were late. And then they finally arrived a lot later than they said they would. So I was on the phone with them at 1:30 a.m. in the morning, trying to figure out what door they needed to enter and telling them how loud they should be knocking on the door and if they should start banging and saying hello.
Right.
So it was a lot of coaching involved, but definitely it's I was bringing that intensity to the team to make sure that what that position was getting filled for that night, and someone felt that, you know, they weren't just showing up to a random location, and it's scary, it's nighttime, you want to have people covering your back. So.
Right. Right.
Mm.
Well, one of the things about staffing is it's a lifestyle business. Like when you're in it, and it's hard to cut it to a 9 to 5, 8 to 6 kind of type thing. And so, you know, yeah, for us, it's always been really important that for the client that we be there and available if they're expecting someone to come to work and they don't show up. They need to be able to call and tell us that. And if there's a candidate that's trying to go to work and they can't find the right gate or they're struggling, they need to be able to reach out to us. And while we don't require and our staff to work 24 hours a day, they understand that the role is such that they're trying to help people. And so you just really showed up and helped really well that day. And I appreciate that. And it's not like that hasn't happened to you 10 times since you've been here in a year. Is that like 2 or 3 times? How often does that happen to you?
Specifically at that time, I don't know if that has happened to me exactly the same way, but there's definitely been late night starts that I have talked to people for just like knowing where to enter in the location. So
how often in a month would you talk to a candidate or a client after 7 p.m. at night or before 7 a.m. in the morning?
I wouldn't say it happens that often.
Okay, so not even every
'cause
month.
Not all the time do we have people starting outside of those hours
Right.
in general. But yeah, it definitely. I think the most important thing is knowing when your candidates will need you and being available for those times.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
It's just being considerate and helpful, and that's super important that our candidates feel the respect and support from us. Like we really consider ourselves to be an agent or an agency on behalf of the worker,
Exactly.
and equally so an agent or an agency on behalf of the client, so that we can support that relationship and bring it together when there may be a void or a communication lapse that we can step into that would not otherwise have a solution, and we get to be that solution. So, and I'm honestly, you're a really great team member, and we're really glad to have you on the team. But I think one of the things that I really enjoy about working with you is you don't need to agree with me. And that you're willing to respectfully and carefully, but pointedly and truthfully talk to me about improvements that we can make or supports that you need. And why do you think that's a challenge for so many people? And why do you think that comes naturally to you? Is that just born in your personality? Is that something? Help me understand.
That's a really good question. I think when it comes to just confrontation, being able to communicate necessary things that will improve with your work experience, definitely, I think it does come from previous experience in workplaces, and it can come from growing up in a home where you learn how to express your needs in a way that's respectful, but that in a way that you also don't feel that you need to be silenced.
Sure.
So just mutual respect. But working at different workplaces definitely teaches you that. It teaches you how to communicate with different types of people, where their push points are, how gentle you have to be with certain topics.
Sure.
But I always push for people to always advocate for themselves, even when I talk to candidates and they start to try to agree with a lower price point of pay scale when they're making more. I always tell them, like, don't sell yourself short. If you have a lot more of experience, keep at it, you know?
Yeah, well, let's advocate for you and see what we can get.
Exactly. So I think I wouldn't say I wouldn't know where I have this origin of knowing when I need to speak for myself, but I definitely think that both scenarios of me having to either be a leader when I was in college and different workspaces that I've had to speak my mind. being
Grown
uncomfortable.
into it.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
And growing
Yeah.
into it. Yes.
Hannah, you don't seem to have a problem speaking truth to power.
Yes.
Why do you think that's easy for you?
I think that we've discussed in a couple of different ways why that is. I think that your home of origin is going to be a massive part of that, how you grew up, what you understood to be normal or not normal. Some people were put in a box where they weren't given that opportunity from their parents or teachers or guardians or whoever that was for them. And I think that that can do some really significant initial damage in a human's ability to step forward and stand up for that. But I think outside of that, I have a very, very strong regard for leadership, but I do not think that leadership gives somebody the opportunity to dismiss somebody else's perspective. And I think that perspective is so important, specifically when you can communicate it effectively. And so I just would say that I'm so happy to hear a leadership team come forward from any way, shape, or form, whether that's like the government or my dad or my boss or whatever that, like, however that category falls out. But the point at which they start to say, like, this is how it is and this is why it is, or like, this is how it is and this is what it's going to be, and they don't give me the why, or they don't give me the perspective shift behind that, I start to be like, oh, let me poke at this. I want to understand what's going on here. And sometimes that's just like, help me understand so that I can fall in line really nicely with you, and happy to agree with you where it falls place. But then sometimes else it's like, okay, well, maybe actually we could talk about that and maybe expand a little more. And so I think that's kind of where it stems from for me.
Okay, so what I would say, it's interesting you both talked about home of origin and some previous work experience. One of the things that's just intriguing to me is I think that there's a lot of Gen Z that has grown up with the opportunity to talk back to authority that way.
Mm-hmm.
That in a lot of ways, and if I could just be cautious in the way I say this, that there's also a lot of Gen Z that has taken that for granted and now thinks that they should be able to poke holes in anything at any time, and
I
any
think
thought convention they can break down. And it's so that it does become, I think it's a real strength of Gen Z that they can do that, but it's also understanding time and place. And if you're with the wrong leadership, they believe that there's never time and place. And if
I
you're with the
think
right leadership, they believe
I have
that.
a thought on that.
Oh, please tell me.
So I think because of age, we don't notice that the other generations do actually do that.
yeah, the exact same thing. That's exactly what I was about to say. Keep going.
We tend to respect it more because it might be coming from someone who's maybe older than us or the same age as us. So it becomes more irritating in a way when older generations see someone who is younger in the workforce challenging or asking questions about things, but really your right hand man or your executive assistant might be asking those exact same questions. But because the way that a lot of us have been wired just generationally, you tend to not see the audacity, if you will, from someone coming that's like near your age or potentially older.
Okay, so that's
And
that's
before, wait, before you keep going, I think that society has changed at that. I think that as an entire group of human beings, we have altered the way that we communicate with one another. And I think it resorts back to social media and the way that every person has been given the opportunity to say anything they want to any human that they want to, at any capacity, with a lot of like very minimal backfire in a lot of ways. But like, everybody has that aunt or uncle who's on Facebook who's saying the shit that you're like, could you please just shut up? Like, oh my gosh, what are you talking about? Everybody has somebody like that. Everybody's got, oh my gosh, what do we call him? Uncle Sal. Everybody's got an Uncle Sal who's up on Facebook and saying the stuff that shouldn't be said. But Anna's right, because of the level that they've grown to, you have a different respect for that. And you're like, oh, that's Sal just being Sal. But when it's a Gen Z that says it, you're like, the audacity of these people. So it's an interesting perspective. And I think that Gen Zs are not as mature and have not quite grown into knowing the time and space and awareness. And some other generations have had more experience and will grow with that. But that's a fact of age, not generation, which is completely separate.
Okay. It's a fact of age, not generation. Yeah,
It's not a
I think I understand what you're saying, and I don't think there's enough meat on that to chase that thought.
I
But
can give you more meat. I'll be passionate about this one.
No. So what validates? So what I hear you saying, and what I hear you saying, is that if I get pushback from my 45-year-old millennial, most leaders, not me, most leaders are more open to hearing that than they are from their 18-year-old intern.
Yeah, correct.
And is there an element of that that's appropriate because the 45-year-old has additional life experience? And just give me a minute before you start shaking your head, Brady. Because they have life experience and because they have industry experience or workplace experience, they have more to bear on it. And that the 18-year-old co-op student has less life experience. And so their opinion should be heard and should be considered, but maybe not at the same weightiness of the person that is more tenured with the company.
So I have a thought on that, because the way that we look at hiring people, we can't weigh in age as a factor. And so in that way, with how we take advice, you weigh advice, but I think a lot of companies have, and I don't think it's actually true, a lot of companies have thrived when they allow the fresh advice that maybe isn't totally based on experience, but it's just a new idea that companies have run with. So I think about Costco in this example.
Okay.
So a huge like business model that they do is that any position you're in the company, and they teach this to you as soon as you start, is that you can go to any level of management with any concern that you have. And it's like an open door policy. They preach that from the top to the bottom.
Okay.
And a couple of years ago, they had a guy who was just like a warehouse like stalker, like a morning stalker.
Yep.
And he said, why don't, like, because they were setting up the tents and things like that because they had a sale for the summers. And he's like, why don't we actually hang them up on the ceilings so people can see them and it doesn't take as much room? Right. And they were like, that's kind of crazy. And they did, and their sales went up because people can see, oh my word, that's where the tents are. Let's go over there, and they're already set up. And so it was taking an idea from someone who was young, a little bit strange and like outrageous. Who's going to hang a tent from the ceiling? That's kind of strange. And it's just about, I do think that internal thought process that you were saying, weighing like someone's experience and years, that can obviously happen normally in your head, but I don't think it should be a standard of practice, because you just never know what kind of good advice you may get regardless of someone's age.
And so that I would totally agree with. I think that people need to be heard. And Hannah's really struggling right now because she doesn't feel like she's heard, because she got her hand over her mouth. She's trying to hold herself back. I love that. But everyone needs to be heard, and everyone needs to be considered on merit. And all merit is equal. It's the contribution that you're bringing. And so if you, that was a good idea, they acted on it, they benefited from it. But like when I'm thinking about my taxes and I want good advice, I want the best voices to be heard the most, the people that have the most knowledge, and that's probably not going to be the youngest person in the room. That doesn't mean I can't listen to them. I actually, so I'm 53, and I made the decision about 5 or 7 years ago to start changing the professionals that advise me to be younger than me instead of to be older than me. And I did that because I wanted them to be with me to the end and not start falling off into retirement while I was still trying to grasp for it. I wanted to make a proactive move towards that. Does that make sense? And so I've always wanted to have the right people bringing me the right ideas and the right information. Hannah, what did you want to say?
The whole conversation started with the concept of audacity. So if you have the audacity, and we'll talk about this in a negative sense, to bring something up, because we want it, like that's where it came from. The concept of Dr. Phil was like, they're saying stupid stuff and I don't want to hear it. Your Gen Zs, or your youngest employees, or your least experienced employees, depending on which category you want to put them in, from whatever you want to do there. But they are the ones who will most likely have the worst ideas because they have the least experience. So they need the most support. So time, place, yes, situationally, but they should still have the opportunity to say every single thing that they can so that they can learn, so that they can go into the next steps.
That's
now,
as you were saying that, I was thinking that even them saying the wrong thing is good feedback because it gives you opportunity to train them.
mm-hmm. Now, when they say the right thing, it is at that point, in my personal opinion, even more impressive than when the senior comes up with the same opinion, because the senior who has the experience has potentially seen that before and they're bringing it forward. Now that's part of their job. They are coming up with solutions. Your worker B, your baseline employee, the person who is not supposed to be doing that, if they come up with the solution, that is now outside of their, what we will call, job description, and even more impressive to me personally.
Yeah, and should be celebrated.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just don't understand like the audacity, like that, what the respect, human to human. Like, let's just have normal conversations. Like, I don't know where the audacity of that comes into play. Like, there should be someone for that human to talk to, whether that's their upper management, the president of the company, or the lowest management, just their floor supervisor. But if they're not given the opportunity to have those conversations with their floor supervisor or whoever that person is supposed to be, that's problematic. And then they need to then go to the next person and say, hey, I'm not getting what I need.
Yeah.
And that's then appropriate for them to be speaking up. Stupid people do stupid things. Stupid people say stupid things in bad areas. But breaking that down to a generational thing, I don't think is fair.
I think I think that's fair. I think the reality is, and this really grates on me a little bit, is when you hear people talking about, well, you have to make your bones, you have to, put in the years to, establish the credibility to be in the room. Like the reality is that because we're a family-based business, Hannah's been sitting in on very high level business conversations
since I was still in a car seat of the back car.
As soon as I got my first Parrot, where I had a microphone in the car and a speaker in the car that could hear, the whole family heard every business conversation. And honestly, my parents treated me that way. As we drove home from Sunday church, or I drove home from school with my dad every day, I got to hear him problem solve real adult problems as a child, and hear he and my mom work through things. And I think that transparency and working through things has made me smarter, and it's influenced my desire to engage other people, younger people, in the process all the way along.
Absolutely.
So there's lots of Gen Z, and particularly boomers, and like, shut up till you're 40. And there's no place for that.
Yeah.
And so now one of the complaints on the Dr. Phil thing, if you've seen the Dr. Phil thing, we'll put a link in the show notes. But one of the things it talks about is how addicted to your phones you are, and how you're always on social media. And I would just like to say publicly about Ana is that Ana is on her phone all the time, but she's on her phone in a good way. She, like, if I have a thought on the weekend that I shoot out to the team. Anna's likely the first to respond. Or there's just been lots of times where you've connected outside of business hours. So like this concept that Gen Zs are lazy and they're on their phone all the time is wrong, in my opinion. There are some that are, and can I tell you, there's some Gen Xs that are lazy.
Yeah.
And so to throw the whole crew under the tires of the bus is not right. So like, how did that become a thing for you, where you were just, I think you said it in a group meeting the other day, it's just send me a text, I'll respond.
Yeah, I think it's just about being available. I definitely don't think it's limited generationally, whether just availability on the phone. Obviously, you know, social media, iPhones, everything that got created by not Gen Zers. But so definitely we are on our phones a whole lot more. We're more connected globally.
Mhm.
And we just know what's happening around us within a couple of minutes, which is
Right.
can be a great thing. I do think that in general, from how much, you know, information and overconsumption can happen, people can get addicted to the phones, and I've seen it at any generational level. Um, I think now in schools are letting kids have their phones out all the time, which I don't think is probably the best thing to have happen. But yeah, for me, I just I have my phone nearby. It's just because there can be something that comes in. There's certain people that I work with that are more reachable if I give them a physical call through my phone than not. So, and especially with things from LinkedIn, I can quickly just do it. I have no problem when it comes to promoting our own marketing or anything like that. I'm quickly on it and it can quickly respond. So, I might be a little bit addicted to it, but I think that's just normal. It's interesting to know what's happening around all over the world and how quickly you can get that type of information. But
Yeah, I think addiction means different things to different people. You see that with alcohol and with everything else. I have lots of friends that have a drink every day, but aren't alcoholics. I have some friends who drink every day and absolutely are alcoholics. And there's that's a brain chemistry thing, I believe. You know, my brother was an addict. I loved him very much. I miss Todd desperately, and I'm going to move on because I'll cry. But the reality is that in our brains, we're all wired a little bit differently, and different substances, different actions have different addictive tendencies based on who you are, how you were created, um, the way God made you, in the end. And so I believe that that's distinct for everyone, and there's tendencies for different people. Um, what what about that? So the millennial generation, Hannah,
Mhm.
was much more, in my impression, much more creating boundaries around work than Gen Z is. Do you find, is that true statistically? Do you know anything about that from your research?
Specifically that not quite as much. I know that millennials, just by observation, are really, really interested in work-life balance, and that was a massive thing for them. I think that that probably really escalated in the midst of COVID as a lot of people got sent to work from home and they had significant lives in both places. Under like just meaning they had wives and children and homes to take care of. So when they finished working, that was then immediately important. And it wasn't as simple as it might be for a lot of the Generation Z who are still in the stage of having an apartment or living with their parents or whatever. And so it was easier for that transition to not be as like rigid and necessary perhaps, but I don't really know a ton or have many statistics on that specifically.
That'd be
But
interesting to understand, and maybe just as you've said, a stage of life thing where young people are more independent, and so they have more freedom,
Mhm.
even as newlyweds. you have more freedom than you will
As a young mom,
with no
more
particular timeline or demands from your parents about when that should happen. But
thanks.
that when there will be grandchildren, you'll have more responsibilities.
Bless you. Bless
Okay.
you and your
No
need to be a grandfather. Hey, you cut off your beard. You no longer have the Santa beard. I at least have a while until that bad boy comes back into full grandpa capacity.
That's, full grandpa capacity is about 8 weeks. I can get that done.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
You
8
were
weeks.
looking like full Santa Claus. That can be done in like a summer. That's insane.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
I
then
can-
just kidding. I need
Chris,
much more time than that.
I don't need a lot of notice. So just let me know and I'll get it. I'll grow it out.
We could. Okay. No, you need you could. How about you drop 30 pounds and then we chat and you can run around with the grandkids outside in the baseball diamond. Maybe that's more realistic time.
30 pounds. You know how long it took to put the 30 pounds on? Not long, but it takes a lot longer to take it off. Okay, let's get out of our family squabbles.
Moving the timelines and the goalposts. But anyways, we'll just skip right over that. But okay, so your comment on like Generation Z, and I want to just step back to your comment on Generation Z and their phones, but then also the lock key generation and how you have experienced more as a generation and the pride that comes from every single person says this. The boomers, they said it. They were like the war, but whatever it was that they stand on. And then the next one comes in and they're like, we were sent home with a necklace. How rude. And then the next ones. And you know what? That's true. There are things that happened in there. Those were massive transitions. Let's not give credit to that. But then that same generation looks at Gen Z and they go, oh, and they have phones. And it's like, what? We're all just whining in some direction or another. What's going on? No, we've all got problems. We've all got like repercussions from those problems. Let's just offer perhaps the same level of respect those conversations are having with one another to the experience
the fact that Anna pointed out that like it wasn't her generation that invented the iPhone.
I love that.
Broken it.
All I did was pick it up. Yeah, exactly.
Right. And somebody put it into your hand at first, right? Like the reality is, Anna, how old were you when you got your first phone?
I was not like many others. I was 18.
18.
So,
ooh.
Yeah, I grew up pretty untraditionally compared to all of my peers.
Okay.
So the rule was as long as I can afford my phone, then I can get it. And I had started a different position, a different job, and my boss needed to contact me. And she was like, this is getting a little crazy that I need to call your friend to get to you.
Right.
So I went out and I got my phone. I didn't love not having a phone when I was 12, 13, 14, like everybody else did. It was definitely very like I stuck out like a sore thumb. But yeah, so I was not like most people. I definitely got my phone a lot later than most people who were born.
But
oh my gosh, okay.
You're a very independent person. And like for some people, and this may have helped in the process, but for some people to not be like others and have that phone right away when they were young would be really hard.
Yeah.
But your character is very strong, and I see you being able to weather that more than some other people.
Yeah, that very much might definitely be the case. It was absolutely unusual that I got my phone later.
Of course.
Okay, wait. I've got so many questions now. When did you first get social media?
I think I was 16.
16. Okay.
Yeah, I got it kind of like secretively because I wasn't allowed. So then I had a fake
yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I played that game. I had a fake account that I got grounded for. She happens.
I was never found out until I was older, and I was like, by the way, I've had this the entire time, and it's okay now. And then it was like, all right.
That's funny. That's funny.
So how do you think That's so curious. How do you think that that affected you, the delay of that? Because for reference, we were born in the same year, you and I,
Mm.
but I had social media when I was in 7th grade. I was 11 or 12 when I first got social media. And like Dave, I was in a bubble for like a bubble that I thought. Like you looked at all the pictures that I posted before I posted them. You had access to everything. Like you would take it at the drop of a hat and it wouldn't be a problem. Um, so it's not like I was like doing insane stuff, but to just the exact difference of like to have and then not to have. What did you feel like because I think that a major part of what social media does is yes, it gets kids addicted, and then it really changes their confidence, and then it really changes their like perception of themselves. So I'd be so curious to know, understanding that you were just like a little bit more developed in the way that you like thought of yourself, the way that you carried yourself. Did that affect you when you got it first? Like, did you notice a pre to post Anna, like social media or cell phone?
Yeah, it's interesting because I definitely saw my friends going through that. I remember having friends being like blocking each other because they were jealous of how the other person looked in their photos and things like that.
Yeah,
Like, what? You can't just be happy for them that they look good in their photos or whatever it was. And even when I did have social media at 16, I didn't have that much Wi-Fi at home. And my dad was cutting
sure.
costs crazy at
Sure.
2 GB, so that's nothing to compare to today. We all have
Sure.
unlimited Wi-Fi for most plans. So I definitely, once I was able to really have it and have a phone that worked and could take better pictures, I wasn't embarrassing myself on social media because I have a lot of friends, family that have just like when you're 12, you're I
Yeah.
don't know,
Oh,
you
you do anything, yeah.
Yeah.
um instead, when I was 15, I was just taking weird videos and photos on my tablet, and no one ever saw the light of day. So I'm really happy about that there's no digital footprint on that. Um, so that being said, I think I just got to experience it through a different lens of watching my friends go through that. And sometimes they would like, they would share their phones with me and show me different things. But I think it was just a lot more of a slow world for me
Sure.
instead of
Mm.
just having constant videos, things like that I could have been getting on earlier. But I'm really glad that I wasn't exposed to that in a very like innocent view where you're constantly comparing yourself and all the stuff that's very damaging in social media that causes a lot of pain and hurt, whether that's bullying that happens or that's you know just a
So
whole
many
lot.
things. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I was glad I was very detached from that world and didn't really experience anything like that because I would always hear with my friends like, "Oh, this person posted this, and we got angry, and we were messaging this," and I was like, "I don't even have a phone that works with Wi-Fi." So
That's
you know,
that's it. So
Mhm.
I said early on that that kids react to the way they were parented and often go in a different direction. Do you think that you'll be more tech friendly for your kids or less tech friendly?
I think early years, like very early years, I think kids benefit from being creative without having instructional ways of how to be creative. So definitely very minimal TV time,
Okay.
minimal things like that because I had it very minimal too as a kid.
Right.
We didn't have TV growing up, and my dad was very anti that.
Right.
And so when we ended up getting more movies when I was like 9, and then that was a whole thing. But there was no like outside source other than that.
Okay.
So I think I would definitely put a lot of limits on that and just
Okay. Interesting. So it hasn't spoiled you against it. It's
no.
actually you see the value in
But I
it.
think when my kids are old enough, I would definitely like we could share that information. We could talk about why that video is funny or whatever, and what could potentially be wrong with
Sure.
that or whatever, just to kind of like guide understanding,
Okay.
what you're seeing out there in social
All right.
media. Because there's so much out there. There's so much that's
Well,
Yeah.
there is
It's a
massive
hard
supply.
world to navigate, and so it's important to equip people
Yeah.
with the right tools.
And
It's really
go ahead.
sorry. I was going to say, it's just really interesting to see how that played out in your role. Understanding we brought you in here to be like, you are intense. You're always on your, like you got this because you were on your phone. You got the email. You responded right away. So you were on it. Like you had that capacity. But then we also talked about how you're very like independent in the way that you think, and you are not afraid to say it, and you are happy to come forward and communicate that. And so those two things I would contribute as somebody who understands a typical Gen Z to the social media aspect of how they grew up. But to then take that and understand that you didn't really have that and it's completely separate is so interesting to me. It just makes me want to dig your brain apart and be like, what made you who you are? But we don't have time for that today. So sorry, Dad, I interrupted you.
Yeah, or an understanding base to actually define all of that. I think that really what you see is strength of character and strength of commitment. It's why we have 3 eyes at the Better Together group. Intensity, which Anna got, intentionality, the follow through to do the things that you want to start. And then really all those 2 things are held together and made better by integrity. And if you don't have integrity, you don't have anything. If you're somewhat different when other people are in the room than you are when you're alone, that's a character crisis. And I know you have boats full of integrity, and that you do have lots of intentionality, but we're highlighting today your intensity, and I just want to say thank you for bringing your fullness to bear on your role in the business, and we're super proud of you, and so glad that you're part of the team. So is that a reasonable spot for us to tie it up?
Absolutely, for sure.
And do you have any last thoughts that you want to share? Anything about any last thoughts you want to share? Anything?
Well, thank you for having me on. Thank you for all the compliments. No, I think we talked about a lot of important things, and I think it's really just humans like to put people in boxes. And so we tend to do that when it comes to generational issues, different things, and we always need to step outside of the box and think about, has this happened elsewhere as well? And then we can be a little bit more impartial when we view different things. And I think it's always important to view things in that lens.
I think that's a great statement. Humans like to put people in boxes. And really what we need to do as leaders is help people get out of the things that confine them, so they can find their way to succeed and to find their fulfillment in what they're doing.
Absolutely.
Break down the barriers and open things up for people and give people opportunities.
Yeah.
Cool.
Sounds good. Now you can go give people lunch. Take the team out. You guys have a great one. Have a phenomenal long weekend, everybody. And, we'll be back.
Great. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay.
Excellent.
Great.
Thank you.